joining us at Streaming Media Europe this year. This is our 7th year since we started back up again in 2006. And once again, I hope you'll agree we've got a very good program set for you. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the editor of Streaming Media Magazine, streamingmedia.com, and the program director for Streaming Media Europe. Yesterday we had a day of pre-conference sessions, some workshops, as well as the Video Infrastructure Summit, which was very successful and held at the Hilton Olympia just down the road. And we'll dovetail on some of those conversations and build off them for the next couple of days. Again, I'd like to thank you all for coming, thank all of our sponsors and exhibitors. The expo hall will be open at 10 o'clock immediately after the keynote session this morning, and then our first breakout sessions begin at 10:30. We've got delegates here from 22 countries. And so I think you'll find it's a nice mix of people and bringing together a group of like-minded individuals, and hopefully you'll get as much networking, you'll get as much out of networking with your fellow delegates as you will out of the sessions. You know, 7 years ago, as I said, we rebooted the event in Europe, and it's amazing how much has changed. You know, when we launched that event, most of the talk was about corporate video, Adobe Flash. There was a lot of talk about media and entertainment video, but much of it at the time was sort of blue sky theorizing because none of it had actually happened yet. And of course today, video everywhere has become a reality, and we'll be talking about that in almost every session today. So I hope you can stay throughout the day, and I hope you can join us at the reception from 5 to 6 in the expo. We'll also be presenting our Reader's Choice Award winners at that reception, so hopefully you can join us for that. And our keynote today comes from one of the pioneers in connected TV, one of the companies that's really been leading the way both in terms of technology and content. Sid Jayant heads up the platform strategy and plans multi-platform strategy and the TV App Store for Samsung. And he's going to talk today about what Samsung is doing, a bit about the connected TV, smart TV world in general, and hopefully give us a little bit of a glimpse into the future as much as he can with what Samsung is doing. And so with that, please welcome Sid Jayant, who's the Content Services Manager Europe for Samsung. Sid?
Good morning, all. As Eric said, I'm Sid. I'm based out of the UK in our European headquarters. I'd like to have the office in London, but that's really not the case. Our offices are always based really outside London or major cities. Anyway, so it's always a big travel to come to these events. Always worth it because as we said, we always meet like-minded people. There's always a constructive discussion around things. Very happy to present the Smart TV opportunity to you today. What I'll do is basically I'll go through what exactly we think Smart TV is, what are we bringing to the market, a little discussion around the complete proposition that we have currently in the market. Moving from there, to be able to understand the opportunity, I personally believe I need to tell you a little bit about what kind of engagement is happening with these new platforms. There's a lot of chatter around whether these devices are actually getting used or not. Technology is just being put in the market, it's getting used or not. A lot of questions around it. So I'll just touch upon a little bit on this. Hopefully that'll give you a little insight on what the opportunity actually is. And then a little detail on what are the new evolving consumer trends around smart TVs and tablets, smartphones. The boundaries are getting thinner. So let's take it from there. Starting first, what is Smart TV? What are we actually bringing to the market? Before I explain this slide to you, this is our basically, on the name of Smart TV, this is what users see from Samsung devices. Just to define it a little bit more before that, when we started planning a Smart TV, the first one around 2008-09, the first things that were addressed were that let it be TV first. Let's not try to throw websites on the television. We were very conscious of that fact, which is why applications have been taken up really, really well in that sense. We put a lot of conscious effort around it that try to create applications because you need to always maintain the nature of the device. And hence, all these applications that are there on a smart TV platform, and I hope the same for all other manufacturers as well, are made with a sense to have a 10-feet user interface. That's exactly how you use a television. It should not be more complicated than using your 4 directional keys and 1 OK. That's why we wanted to draw only applications, and that was the first step towards taking a smart TV approach. Secondly, what can these applications bring along? So as I said, TV first, which is why the first set of content as well, which makes sense here, or which made sense, was more of video, because as and when you start developing a new product, adding more content to it, you need to respect the nature of the device. Just because Maps works well on mobile phones and smart is the same word on both mobile phones and television, we can't just throw Maps on the television, which is why there was a conscious effort around bringing a lot of VOD content, a lot of catch-up content, and it has been taken up pretty well across the globe, more so in more developed countries, let's put it that way, where the broadband infrastructure and the technical standards are more evolved and developed. Yes, the first approach was to bring along more content that you like watching on the television screen in a better experience, easier to access. These were the first few steps we had taken towards devising or creating an SDK that a lot of our developers could use and create applications that are very entertaining and good to use on the television device. Then came the user interface design. That, of course, every year it changes. We try to make it more fluid, more attractive every year, more catchy, because until now, the thing is that the smart world is somehow understood that it's kept in a separate silo as compared to the broadcast world. That's really not the case. Yes, on smart TVs, you have to press a different key to go to the smart services to be able to access them. But while we go through the presentation, you'll see that there are services also available which allow you to seamlessly transfer between the broadcast world and the IP-connected world in that sense. So these were the first few set of thoughts that came around creating a service. If you look at this user interface, we call it Smart Hub because the idea was to have one user interface that brings everything together, and user doesn't have to go to a million different menus to access different kinds of content. So you'll notice, and this picture is not completely representative, but what you see in our normal Smart Hub user interface is that you have the basic TV functionalities lined up there as well, and the smart functionality. So whatever the user wants can go and access in with just basically 2 clicks. There are certain sections here. This section is meant for users to not change because we want to recommend certain pieces of content in different markets, which is more relevant. Again, this is a more generic picture, but in UK, for example, you'll see BBC iPlayer, BBC Sport, Lovefilm, Netflix. So all the major services that get used in those markets are presented right then and there, so that the user doesn't have to go here and there to look for it. Whereas this area is primarily to customize and move around as and when you like. That was the first user interface that you actually go out and see on the first screen. But then it can't just end at applications, which is why this year the new innovation that we came out with was accessing the TV with your gestures, with your voice control. And people have taken it up in an entertaining way, let's put it that way. It is not something that is a mass market thing because, of course, it requires a high-end product and also needs certain specifications, like has to have a webcam to be able to use gesture and voice control. But it has been a great experience for us. However, it shouldn't be only restricted to checking out the menu and increasing channel up or changing channel, changing volume. So recently we came out with an application. I'm sure all of you have played it on your smartphones, and this is what was launched last month, just to show you a quick video. yes, you can buy one of our 7 series and above TV and play Angry Birds at your home, play along, have fun with your family. This is just one example of how the hardware side is coming together a lot more with the software side and integrating the basic features, making use of the great technology that's coming out not only from us, but from our developers, from the various content owners. And gaming has been kept as a low profile for a long time, actually, on smart TVs. But this just starts a new domain altogether. And yes, of course, video is important, but the TV can be used for so much more because it occupies the main space in your house, and it just allows your complete family to come together. And then I was telling you about the boundaries getting thinner, but that was more about the multi-device part. However, in the broadcast side and the IP connected side, this is a service that we came out actually in 2010. And yes, there are a lot of standards that are coming out now, or have been in the past year or so, which can be used by broadcasters to create applications or to make a standard around it. But there were times when there was no standard. So we created a service called Channel Bound Service, which basically allows a user to easily transfer from the basic live channel to that particular broadcaster's applications, how many ever he or she they want to present. So this was done with TF1 in France. A red button comes up. Do you want to view more or related content? And TF1 made 6 excellent applications, which basically you are in the TF1 experience, but you're watching on-demand content if you want, watching movies from TF1. You can check sports updates, news, weather, EPG, and some other things. So basically, it just creates a framework wherein you can add a lot of interactivity along with the broadcasters. Both sides stay happy because the experience is still within the broadcast world. However, the user is getting a lot more than the user was getting initially. Moving to the multi-device part, the usage of smart TVs, again, if you want to keep it restricted with only a remote control, then it stays in only a certain amount of user experience. But when you start bringing in more devices, for example, one of the key services that we launched was a Smart View application on Androids, and actually also on iOS. And what the application does is that first thing is that it acts as your universal remote control for most of your Samsung devices in the living room or the house. But on top of that, with tablets work out really well as your second TV viewing screen, and you often want to take it around different rooms. And Smart View app allows you to do dual viewing, so you can choose different sources. You can watch TV on one channel on the television itself. However, if your wife wants to watch, or your second half wants to watch a different movie from a Blu-ray player, for example, so you can select a different source and take it around the house as and when you want. So a couple of new innovations that came out around using the multiple devices capabilities have been great and have been increasing engagement for overall smart TVs, smartphones, tablets, or be it PCs. This is something, AllShare is Samsung's end screen framework, let's call it this way, a multi-screen framework, which basically allows you to share your media experience or media content across your multiple Samsung devices. Now, until 2011, it was more of an in-home experience. But this year, we came out with something called AllShare Play, which allows you to have things like remote access. You're outside of your home, you want to share some of your own media that is stored at your own PC back home. Basically, it uses cloud. We use SugarSync this year, and it allows you to access your content remotely wherever you are, as long as you're using your account. It's not only limited to stored pictures, but also moves to videos, music, etc. Also, if you're in the house, it allows you to share your web pages and basically enhance the experience to multiple devices. Before we move on to the opportunity side and the engagement, just a little recap on the main challenges that we faced while we were developing the smart TV. I think now we've reached a stage wherein the critical mass is almost there. There are enough people using this technology. But initially when we set out, there were three main challenges. I wouldn't say business model was that big a thing, but still I'll address it. Technology, just from the perspective that every time a new thing comes out and people get excited about it, there is always a standard required. However, it's not always there when you're starting off something new. Also, smart TV has been a differentiating factor for us for a while. And this was one of the challenges, that how to get so many content partners across the globe to agree on one piece of technology or one set of technology that they will use to develop applications. I remember in 2009-10, every new VOD aggregator we met wanted a new DRM, a new streaming standard. But we basically went around and tried to create, let's say, a least common denominator. Create a set of standards which basically cater to the widest set of developers, content aggregators possible. And that was the main approach that we took. Also, every year, as and when required, we've been adding more and more, primarily DRM standards, primarily streaming standards. Also, I think to start with, we use a very proprietary set of technology for developing applications. But last year, we moved our application engine to WebKit, which is a lot more standard, HTML5 based, and that's why it's getting taken up more. So I think 3-4 months ago, we had about 25,000 developers registered only for smart TV. Not that there are that many applications. Sorry, it's a longer cycle to develop applications. But there are a lot of developers who are excited around it. I think a number of new companies have emerged to create applications for smart TVs. So it's been all pretty nice in that sense for the whole industry. User experience, like I touched upon a little bit earlier, we're very conscious about the fact that we don't want to throw web pages. There were a number of implementations that came up as web TV earlier, and it was basically all about browsing web on the television, which is really not an ideal service to do. We do have web browser, but again, it is more and more optimized towards this large screen that you can maneuver through your basic TV remote control. When it came to the business models part, like I said, it was a smaller challenge, but it was more about, again, trying to create a de facto standard sort of a model that gets agreed upon by content aggregators, broadcasters, movie studios. Our primary dealing is with the content owners, not the studios, the content aggregators primarily. And we basically put out a very reasonable a very reasonable business model to most content aggregators, which is if you are earning something new or more out of this new platform, then we ask for a reasonable share out of that, which has been actually easily accepted by pretty much most of the content aggregators that we met. To go into the opportunities part, just a little insight into where the connected TV market is heading. The only piece of technology that I'm seeing right now in this specific space, and this is not including the consoles, in terms of the home's penetration, it is just skyrocketing. More and more people are looking towards, it's not only about consumers also buying smart TV, it's also about the fact that more and more CE manufacturers are extending their lineup because obviously they are seeing the benefits towards it. So like Samsung, many others are also extending their lineup and bringing more and more smart TVs in the market. Consumers are seeing the benefits straight away and hence are either buying or looking at buying a smart TV in the very near future. It has also been the thing that the life cycle of television has traditionally been 6 to 7 years. So you don't really expect a consumer to buy a new television every year just because you're launching a new service every year. So we are trying to bring that cycle down to 4 to 5 years, I think. Also, even then, if the user doesn't want to buy it, there are still Blu-ray players that also give pretty much similar service. There are different hardware requirements which don't allow you to have exactly the same service, but most of the service is similar, which means that through 2015, most of us would have a smart TV, be it on the TV itself or be it with a supported device. But the growth is great, and we see a lot of potential in this. Every panel or speech I go into, people ask me about connection rates. My company doesn't allow me to say a lot of it. But I'll tell you, there were times, I think around 2009-10, when we would be happy with a 5-10% connection rate, although it was always a little higher than that. It has been growing at a very healthy pace, month on month. It's not a fake assumption anymore. A lot more of the people use these devices nowadays. We use very conservative means to measure our connection rates. There are various ways in which you can measure it. Some measurements that are available outside in the market are just around connecting the internet and the device is activated, but that doesn't ensure if the device is actually getting used. How we measure it is how many unique visitors are going to your portal and actually using the service. But again, having said that, I can't give exact figures. Having said that, it's growing at a very healthy rate, showing no signs of reducing. Still, connected TVs require a lot more usage from the end users, which is why you will see various innovations coming through from various companies on trying to manipulate the user journey in a way that is more perceivable for the end user, and trying to make the connectivity as easy as possible. A little detail on what kind of applications get used actually on television. And we're very happy when these charts have been consistent for the past 2-3 years. This is one of the major territories in Europe. This is what we set out to do actually. We said people will watch a lot of video on smart TVs because we are just giving them a lot more easier access. We are giving them time-shifted content. We are giving them more content. And that's what is happening. People are watching a lot of catch-up, as and whichever countries it's available in. The majority of viewing is around catch-up and is around video on demand. This is just a figure around a distribution around the top 10 local services I have in one of the countries. But it is exactly in line with what we set out to do for a smart TV. And the users have used it in a way that we expected them to. So let's put it that way, that the innovation has gone in the right direction so that the users are using them accordingly. But now, as I said, that the boundaries are getting thinner. More often than not, we are hearing various audience measurements or various researchers coming and talking to us about how are these second and the third screen devices getting used. 60 to 70% of your tablets are being used more at home than outside. Where? Primarily more, out of that about 60 to 70% more in the living room as compared to in other rooms, which basically means that there is a lot of simultaneous viewing while there is a TV viewing happening. That brings various problems, but that also brings a lot of opportunities. We look at it as opportunities because if the user is behaving in a certain way, it's upon all of us in the industry to be able to use that and monetize that in a certain way that helps the complete value chain. That's why, so the major things that we are seeing on what the user is trying to do while watching TV is, first, of course, complementary content is something very important. People look at something on a television screen, try to search for more about it, or because these small screens are so much more efficient at searching things. But on top of that, also, smartphones and smart devices around you are increasing a lot of, or initiating a lot of the online activity. You don't go to your PC to go and search for something. Whatever is the closest device, that is picked up and being used for search for complementary content or for additional information. Tablets are being used more for entertainment purposes and, of course, shopping, searching, email, social networking, etc. So there is a clear trend wherein user is watching 2 or 3 screens at one point, at all together. Of course, not concentrating on all at one point of time, but there is certainly a trend wherein users are looking at searching more, at discovering more, which is why we personally feel, and this is sort of a sneak peek into what we plan to do in the coming years, very shortly actually, is that we really feel that the end users look for a piece of content instead of the company where they should buy it from. Of course, the applications, the way they have been put right now on our main interface is that one application, and you go inside and then you try to search for what you actually want to watch. We, however, feel that the users actually are looking for a specific title, a specific episode that they want to watch. So we're going to try to reverse the user journey in a way that respects the end user, because the user is looking for specific content, but also maintain the partnerships with our partners and trying to bring content from there. And that is something that we'll be working very hard on in the coming year or so, to change the user journey in a way to meet the end user's expectations in a faster way and in an easier way. What these things that I have spoken about mean for us in the complete value chain. This is how I see the content value chain here. When I say the developer and the aggregator part, it brings in a lot more companies in there, but this just felt simpler. My personal opinion is that with these new devices, there has been only a lot more opportunity in coming along. Every piece of this value chain has got more to do now, has got more opportunities to explore, and we feel that with these devices, the value chain is actually getting stronger. The part in between about the developers, I mean, there were no smart TV developers before 2008, 9, or not much to talk about, but now there are successfully running businesses. You see in many conferences, there are so many companies working together. And I think these smart TVs have helped add a new part of the value chain for the televisions. Producers or the content aggregators have more windows to promote their content in, or to sell their content in. For us, the platform owners, we have differentiated features to sell our devices to the end customers. And retailers, again, the same thing. They have additional sales going on outside and wider channels to cater to. At the end, we feel the end user is getting benefited from every innovation that's coming out, as long as it's not intrusive with the current viewing experience and it has been tastefully designed. So overall, I think with the coming, with the smart TVs innovation coming into picture, every single part of the value chain has got better and has got more opportunities to look into. I'll leave you with this thought that with the smart TVs and the smart devices overall, I'm divulging a little bit here into more devices, but basically the TVs now can talk to all of these devices, which basically gives all of us opportunities to create services that can work seamlessly across all of these devices. So basically you can have 4 screens at home itself without being able to, or without the need to buy a new television. There is a strong focus from the complete industry to be able to create services that work well across all devices. Of course, what will be important is to engage the users more. For our part is to create powerful devices and great user experiences. But when you talk about the user engagement, it's a shared responsibility between us, content owners, content aggregators, developers, and we are all working together towards creating enhanced user engagement towards it. Once we work through it, I think we are very close to it, and we're reaching this critical mass, and there's a lot of monetization opportunity around it for every single part of the value chain. So that is the last thought I would leave you with, that past 3 years have been very exciting, 4 years for smart TVs. We're just going into a very wide focused, but a wide in terms of business opportunity zone, and it's upon us on how we make use of the complete user journey to be able to create great services for the end users. Thank you.
I'll come around with a mic for anyone who has questions. I'll start off by asking, you showed a slide about that revealed what users are actually doing with the apps on television, and obviously the majority is still catch up and then VOD. Those other 3 or 4 slices, are you seeing those grow at all significantly?
Yeah, I mean, sports, for example, we did a study after we launched a few successful services around Olympics, and we monitor application clicks, etc., unique visitors. And in that 6 weeks period, there were new services launched just to cater to the Olympics trend. For example, we launched, I think pretty much every manufacturer launched BBC Sports in the UK, which basically was running 24 HD live streams. I mean, you couldn't, even if you wanted to, you couldn't miss a single race in that sense. Or in Spain, similarly, the local public broadcaster launched a service with us. In Poland, we launched a channel-bound service, which basically allowed you to do what MHEG was doing here, press a red button and watch any game that you wanted. So sports is getting taken up very well. We have some very interesting services coming around. For example, there's a service we have in Netherlands, which shows you the local Premier League, and you can buy a subscription and watch it there. So sports is getting taken up very well. Like I showed gaming, because now we're taking it a lot more seriously as well. In the US, there are a lot heavier experimentation being done on that, not yet come to Europe. But gesture control gaming is something that we'll get very serious about. Angry Birds was a great launch. It brought in a lot of users with us. And so gaming and sports will be also very important in the coming time. Yeah.
Questions from the audience?
Sid, so with smart TV growth and growing, coming to market, taking off, do you see that cannibalizing Samsung's and other manufacturers' existing set-top box platform market? And do you foresee a point in time where operators like in the UK, Virgin and Sky may come direct to market with a loss-led, I don't know if that's the right word, but with a smart TV or a connected TV platform that is effectively a set-top box integrated with a TV? Do you think that's in the near future, or do you think that's still a long way off?
So I don't know if you were at IBC this year, ANIFA, and we launched this service with TeliaSonera, Elion. It's basically a set-top box-less solution. I'm not saying set-top boxes are going away, but basically there has been a lot of chat around us trying to position ourselves as competitors to the operators. We really want to work with them, and Elion relationship is an example for that. However, in the end, it's about the end user. Whichever part provides greater end user experience, which cannot come without partnerships. Samsung always works towards partnerships, so be it operators or be it internally for our set-top box division. Whatever works the best for the end user, we'll go with that. Having said that, set-top boxes are not going anywhere in the near future, but I'm sure more and more such partnerships will come along.
You mentioned consumer behavior and the lines blurring between broadcast and OTT and other services people access through their televisions. Can you speak a little bit to the different countries and regions within Europe and which regions are ahead of others in terms of consumer adoption and embrace of the TV as a way to access all of these services and apps?
Absolutely. UK is very much on top. Also because of the fact that there are content owners and aggregators who are a lot more proactive and creating great services like iPlayer, which is one of the single most used service on our platform in terms of catch-up. But also in other countries like Germany, you have services like Maxhome that work really well. You have Sweden. I mean, Sweden and Netherlands are anyway very high usage zones in terms of the broadband infrastructure, quick adoption of new technology. So Sweden, Netherlands are high usage zones, adopt pretty quickly. You move to Eastern Europe, Poland is great. I was actually amazed the way content owners, broadcasters have taken up this technology so quickly. And I basically sometimes consider Poland as part of Western Europe because its adoption is very high there. So there are certainly a lot of parts of Europe which are taking up very well. There are still some sections wherein the usage is not enough, but there are various factors to it. One is how good your broadband infrastructure is. That reduces the experience. You never want to see a buffer circle on your screen. But also on top of that, content owners in certain countries have taken a little more time as compared to other areas. So I think it's a mixture of various factors, but certainly most of Western Europe is doing very well, and Poland in Eastern Europe is doing very well as well. Austria, Switzerland are also very high usage zones.
So thank you. I was just thinking about HbbTV. What's your take on that versus the more proprietary standards, and how do you see the take-up there?
It's a standard that is coming along. Like I said, the channel-bound service is very similar to HbbTV, actually, what I showed with TF1. But we want to do it in 2010. With HbbTV, you need to, I mean, I don't think it was completely ready at that time. Now it is, which is why it's supported on all our devices in the markets that require it. So France, Germany, I mean, extending until even Poland this year, basically. So I think around 7 or 8 countries, our devices support HbbTV. So it is definitely growing, and I think more and more broadcasters will use it because broadcasters want standards. It gives them a way to get that. For us, it's no different. It's another piece of technology that's allowing to bring more content and easier access to more content of what you like on these beautiful devices, which are very smart. So yes, we'll adopt it as and when we go. Definitely support it. No contradiction there.
Could you offer a view on how much the consumers do direct URL access into the TVs using the remote
Can you
control?
please repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, so enter a URL directly into the smart TV for straightforward web browsing. You didn't.
Once again, sorry.
Okay, so use their TV just to browse the internet. So they just enter the URL.
Just web browsing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Various times I said in my presentation that the idea was not to throw websites on the television, right? However, the web browser that we have on our television gets clicked a lot. I don't have figures on how much time people are spending in there, but my personal theory behind it is that when users look at internet and a device, first 2 things people think of is browsing the web and YouTube. And these are 2 very heavily used services on our devices. Having said that, I think we can take a little credit on that the browser, the way it has been defined on the television screens, is also optimized, first of all, for the big screen. Not too many parts that you can do. It allows you to bookmark websites. It allows you to browse the web easily with the same 4 keys. So yes, it gets used a lot. But I think the better way to use content on television is applications. Yeah.
I mean, maybe you can't share this information.
Okay.
But could you offer a relative usage of apps versus open internet? 50-50, 60-40?
Again, it depends on the specific markets, because the way our user interface presents it is on the same main screen, I have the best services that I want to present, very much in the same area as the browser. So visibility is a big factor on what gets clicked. But if the services are strong enough, for example, if you talk about iPlayer, it will score more as compared to a web browser. But then there's a lot of credit that goes to BBC in that because they've defined a great user interface. However, in some other markets, you may not have as strong services as iPlayer. Then people go into browser a lot. So that is how much I can tell you about it. Numbers-wise, very frankly, we've not really launched or shown any numbers in the market. A couple of reasons is that, first of all, the data that we have is for 2 years now. I personally feel 2 years data is not enough to have consistency and talk about that this is exactly the trend that you have there. Still, we've seen 2 years of consistent data on our devices, but we want to take a little more time before we go out with the exact press releases on what is the connection rate, comparisons. But general trend-wise, that is the main reasoning around it, that if you have strong enough catch-up services, VOE services, they'll get clicked more. But web browser is quite heavily used, actually. Yeah. So is YouTube.
Sid,
Yeah.
the Samsung All-Share is a variation on DLNA, I think.
Yes.
Perhaps you could comment on whether TV manufacturers are trying to converge on DLNA standard, or do you see divergence?
I think pretty much everyone is using DLNA. We might all have our different implementations due to various reasons, which frankly even I'm not aware of. I mean, I would like a standard world wherein we all use the same technology piece. I think converging to one standard will take a while. However, I think from the end user's perspective, there's no difference. They're all getting the same service. It's more for us, the industry people who have troubles creating services around it. So yes, divergence is a problem, and probably it'll stay for some time. But I think there is an effort towards going towards a more focused approach and getting everyone to one set of standards. It'll take a while, though. I don't think I have the perfect answer for that, to be very frank. I think it is going to take a little time before all manufacturers come to one specific set of standards to use it.
And the All-Share Play that is used outside the home, is that within the DLNA standards, or is that outside it?
It's within. Everything is complete. All-Share Play is based on DLNA, basically.
Hi, just a question on companion apps for smartphones and tablets. It's early days for that, so I was just wondering your general thoughts as to how you see those developing, and also from Samsung's point of view, is that something that you'll leave to the domain of the developers and the markets, or will you try and influence that?
Very, very interesting area for us, because again, it's another way for us to engage the user further. Like I said, user is anyway looking for more search and more complementary content. If there are great services that already make use of that user behavior and create great services, then we'll be happy to bring them along on the platform. And depending on how the trend goes, we'll probably think of exploring that ourselves as well. You never know. Having said that, we're definitely open to developers who are creating services like that, because it is very interesting for us. I mean, absolutely.
Well, Sid, again, one more question.
Will there be cooperations with audio streaming services coming up, like Spotify? And do you see a potential for this on smart TVs?
Will there be?
Will there be?
We just launched Spotify 2 days ago. So yes, that's a good news. I think I should share with you as well. Spotify is now live on Samsung Smart TVs from, I think, past 2-3 days. great service. Please experience it. Let me know the feedback. I think it's live there, yeah. I mean, we've had music streaming services for a while, actually. For example, the first launch of Blu-ray players in the US, in terms of the connectivity part, 2009 sometime, two services were launched, Netflix and Pandora. And I think the trend started since then. And in Europe, we've had, let's say, smaller services, but effective ones. And now Spotify is there on the platform. So absolutely, yeah. Music is interesting. I mean, it resonates very well with the home theater systems, right? So you basically don't need to plug in your laptop or something else to your hi-fi system, basically. You have everything there. Just click and then start playing.
What do you see, what will prevail? Which monetization model? Will it be ad-based, or would it be paid content, in your opinion?
I think it's a mix. Right now, 3-4 business models we work towards. Like I said, if our content aggregator or content owner is getting something out of presenting content on a new platform, then we ask for a reasonable share, be it transactional, be it subscription. There is a small share that we ask for. So that is already existing. Whereas there are certain ad-based services, even for them the rule is same, because it's a new platform. You did not have living room access with another platform earlier. We are providing that to you on a bigger screen, better experience, so we ask for a certain share there. So there are 3 main models working at this point, but there is no clear winner at this point, I would say so. I think it's a mixed distribution in that sense. But basically, it's a revenue share model on whichever generates revenue.
One more question.
How easy is it for people to add new applications, or is it basically closed by Samsung? So basically, as a consumer, I've got it basically as a minority channel, which you may not normally support. I want to add it in.
Let me understand this right. Are you asking how easy it is it to build applications for television?
And then for them to be installed by a consumer on their TV, or is it closed? Basically, it's got to be an application approved by Samsung.
So, going through the whole process, starting from developers, there has been obviously a learning cycle, but development can be shortened to as short as 1 month. I've seen cases between 1 and 2 months, various of those, but some take a lot longer. Depends on what kind of application it is. If it's a complicated, let's say, live streaming service, then it requires a lot more closer work with us, and you can't just work with our SDK and then do it, because we'll have to just cooperate much closer. That requires more time. Once that development is finished, then we have our quality assurance process, which basically ensures that anything that the user sees is not going to end his user experience then and there, because all we have is, or any content owner for that matter, has like 15 seconds with the end user. You don't want a bad experience there. So we have a quality assurance process, which is quite rigorous actually. Sometimes brings a lot of pain in my life, because a lot of content owners don't like it. It takes quite a while there. Having said that, the duration there is about, again, ranging between 1 and 2 months. 2 months is a bad case. We are trying to shorten it to 1 month and lesser. It hasn't become lesser than 1 month for a lot of cases, very few. But yes, it requires between 1 and 2 months to do the servicing, quality assurance. Once that happens, the service is pushed from the server, basically to go live on our operating server. But then where the user sees it, a lot of it depends on which applications we want to show on which part of the user interface. On the first screen, for example, right now we have about 15 spots. Some of those are taken up by default services. The top 5 are recommended services, which the user cannot change. So we push updates there. However, there is a My Applications area, where you can download as many as 100 to 100 applications if you want to. And the only, the easiest, it's quite easy actually, because all you need to do is Again, on the main interface, there's a Samsung Apps area. You just click that, you go in there, you select your application, hit download, now runs basically. So it's 3-4 clicks, which basically gets you an application. Once you download an application, it goes on the main interface in the My Applications bottom section, but in a scroll user interface basically. So in the front page, we can't clutter it too much, so maximum 10-15 can stay in the front page. I think that is a conscious decision as well, because then becomes the fight about who should be placed and stuff. But then the end user requires very simple first interface. So you can go into various different pages later on, but downloading itself is not very difficult.
What sort of costs are involved with like the approval process, or is that just something you do and then you basically look for a revenue share afterwards?
For quality assurance,
Yeah.
we don't charge anyone for quality assurance. It's our own cost. I mean, we have to take a hit in that as well.
Yeah.
But I think which is actually a great question. I don't think there's a lot of this understood in the industry, because Samsung has a lot of resources, not only in headquarters, but in Poland working as well for the European applications, testing, giving feedback. We have a website called Samsung Developers Forum, where you as a developer can go and ask questions. We have a support team that answers questions for you. Then you upload application. If something is wrong, we write back to you. So there's a lot of work that goes from our side as well in that. But most of it is human resource cost actually from our end. I think it's similar from a developer's end as well. More of it is human resource cost.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Sid, and thank you for all your questions. The expo hall will be opening momentarily, and the first breakout sessions will be at 10:30. So I'll see you throughout the day. If you have any questions about the event, feel free to grab me and ask them, and if I can't answer them, I'll find someone who can. Thank you. Thanks, Sid.